Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I'm a 35-year-old guy who's always been a bit of a romantic. I dreamed of finding that perfect someone to share my life with. I had a few relationships over the years, but nothing ever quite clicked. Then a few years ago, I met her online. She was 36, lived in a different state, and seemed perfect. We hit it off immediately, spending hours chatting and video calling. We had so much in common. Same taste in movies, books, and even a shared love for chocolate hazelnut spread. After months of long-distance dating, including a few visits to each other's cities, she suggested I move in with her. I was over the moon. It felt like everything was falling into place. So I packed up my life, quit my job, and moved states to be with her. I was nervous, but excited. I mean, we'd spent time together before, so I thought I knew what I was getting into. The moment I arrived at her place, it was like a switch flipped. The woman who greeted me wasn't the same person I've been dating. She was cold, critical, and seemed annoyed by my very presence. Every little thing I did seemed to grate on her nerves. Take the Nutella incident, for example. Back when we were dating long distance, we'd often joke about our shared love for the stuff. So when I saw a jar in her cupboard, I thought nothing of having a small spoonful each night. It was our thing, you know? But apparently it wasn't anymore. One morning, as I was making my coffee, she stormed into the kitchen. "What do you think you're doing?" Making coffee. "I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about my Nutella. You've been eating it every night, haven't you?" "Well, yeah, just a spoonful. Is that a problem?" "Of course it's a problem. You're eating all of it. Do you have any idea how expensive that stuff is?" I was baffled. We both had good jobs, and I've been buying most of the groceries anyway. It wasn't like we were hurting for money, but I figured, hey, maybe she just really likes her Nutella. So I decided to fix the problem. The next time I went grocery shopping, I bought a huge jar of Nutella for myself. When I got home and started unpacking the groceries, she walked in and immediately zeroed in on the Nutella. "What's that?" "Oh, I bought my own Nutella. I figured that way I wouldn't eat yours." "Are you kidding me? Why would you buy something I already have? Where do you think we're going to put that? Do you think I have unlimited cupboard space?" I just thought. "You didn't think, that's the problem. God, how can you be so insensitive?" This went on for days. Everything I did was wrong. The way I folded laundry, how I loaded the dishwasher, even the way I breathed apparently annoyed her. After about 3 weeks of this, I knew I had to get out. This wasn't a woman I'd fallen for, and I couldn't live like this. I booked a flight back to my home state for 2 days later. But before I left, I had one last trick up my sleeve. Call it petty revenge if you want, but I like to think of it as poetic justice. I noticed a discount store had Nutella on sale, so I bought 3 cases, 72 big jars in total. The day before my flight, while she was out, I spent an hour hiding these jars all over her house. I put them in her bathroom vanity, tucked them into her sock drawer, hid them in her car, and even stashed some in her garden shed. I even emptied out a few saucepans in the kitchen and put jars in there. Now you might think, free Nutella for life, what's the problem? But I knew her. She had this weird obsessive thing about order and control. Finding Nutella in unexpected places for months to come, it would drive her up the wall. I left the next day without saying goodbye. We didn't speak after that. Weeks passed and I started rebuilding my life back in my home state. Then out of the blue, I got a message from her. "Screw your Nutella and screw you." I burst out laughing. It was childish, sure, but it felt good to know I'd gotten under her skin the way she'd gotten under mine. But the story doesn't end there. A few months later, I got another message, this time from her neighbor. Apparently, Karen had been going absolutely nuts, pun intended, trying to find all the Nutella. She'd torn her house apart, convinced there were more jars hiding somewhere. Her obsession had gotten so bad that she'd started accusing her friends and family of hiding more jars as some sort of twisted prank. The neighbor told me Karen had become the talk of the neighborhood, known as a Nutella nutcase. She'd even been seen digging up her garden. certain there must be jars buried there. In the end, my little prank had exposed her controlling, obsessive nature to everyone around her. I heard she'd even lost her job because she wouldn't stop talking about the mysterious appearing Nutella jars. I found a new job, met someone new who appreciates my quirks, including my love for chocolate hazelnut spread. And now we laugh about the great Nutella capper of our past. Sometimes a little bit of sweetness is all you need to expose a bitterness in others. One day, I ran out of milk and decided to make a quick trip to the local grocery store. Just a normal errand on a normal day, or so I thought. I hopped into my car and drove the short 10-minute route to the store. The parking lot was pretty full when I arrived, but I managed to find a spot near the back. As I was getting ready to exit my vehicle, I noticed two women having a heated argument a few rows over. At first, I tried to mind my own business, but their voices kept getting louder and it was hard not to pay attention. From what I could gather, one woman had swooped in and taken a parking spot the other woman was waiting for. Petty disagreement, but tempers were flaring. Woman 1, you can't just steal someone's spot like that. I was clearly waiting here with my blinker on. Oh, please. I didn't see any blinker. This is a public lot. First come, first served. Are you blind? My kid saw you cut me off. You need to move your car right now. I'm not moving anywhere. Maybe you should have been quicker instead of holding up traffic. Their bickering went back and forth like this for a minute or two. I was starting to feel uncomfortable just sitting there watching, but I also didn't want to get out and walk past him to enter the store. Just as I was contemplating leaving and coming back later, things escalated quickly. The first woman, a heavyset blonde probably in her 40s, stormed back to her minivan. She yanked open the driver's side door and started rummaging around inside. My heart sank as I saw her emerge holding a handgun. You think this is funny? I'll show you what happens when you mess with me and my kids. And she began waving the gun around wildly. I ducked down in my seat, not wanting to make any sudden movements. Through my windshield, I could see other shoppers scrambling to take cover or flee the area. A few had their phones out, presumably calling 911. The second woman didn't back down despite now facing an armed assailant. I couldn't tell if she was incredibly brave or just foolish. Woman 2, are you insane? Put that away before someone gets hurt. There are children here. Shut up. I'm teaching you and everyone else a lesson about respect. The only lesson here is that you're an unhinged maniac. I'm not afraid of you. Oh yeah? Maybe you should be. I'm not playing around. Part of me admired the second woman's courage in standing up to a literal gun-toting Karen. But mostly I just wanted her to stop antagonizing the unstable woman with a firearm. I found myself frozen, afraid to start my car or make any moves that might draw attention. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 to 10 minutes, this standoff continued. Karen kept her gun trained on the other woman while screaming threats and obscenities. Other bystanders were either huddled in their vehicles like me or had fled the scene entirely. Finally, sirens could be heard approaching. A police cruiser came speeding into the lot with lights flashing. A female officer quickly exited her vehicle, drew her own weapon, and began shouting commands. Police! Drop your weapon immediately! Karen seemed oblivious to the cops' arrival at first. She continued ranting at the other woman for a few moments before the officer's urgent tone seemed to register. Ma'am, I won't tell you again. Drop the gun now and get on the ground. This doesn't concern you. Mind your own business. Drop it now or I'll be forced to fire. This is your final warning. Something in the officer's voice must have finally gotten through to Karen. She slowly lowered her gun and placed it on the ground. Then she laid face down on the pavement with her hands behind her back. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the situation was finally under control. The officer cautiously approached Karen, reholstered her own weapon, and began to handcuff the woman. But just as she was about to secure the cuffs, Karen suddenly sprang into action. With surprising speed and strength, she twisted around and grabbed the officer. Before anyone could react, she had slammed the smaller woman onto her back. Karen then began raining down punches on the prone officer. Stop resisting. Stand down now, the officer yells. But Karen was in a frenzy, continuing her assault. The officer tried to defend herself and reach for her equipment, but Karen's size and position gave her the advantage. To my horror, Karen then made a grab for the officer's holstered gun. Then, when it seemed like tragedy was imminent, an enormous muscular man came sprinting into view. In one fluid motion, he wrapped his arms around Karen's neck and yanked her off the officer. Karen flailed wildly, trying to break free of the man's iron grip. The Good Samaritan says, "I've got her, officer. Arrest her." The police officer scrambled to her feet, clearly rattled but determined. She rushed forward to handcuff Karen, who was still struggling in the man's chokehold. "You're under arrest. Stop resisting." "Let go of me. Can't breathe." "Should I release her, officer?" "Not yet. Wait until I have the cuffs secured." After a brief struggle, the officer managed to get the handcuffs in place. Only then did the Good Samaritan release a hold on Karen. She immediately began shouting and thrashing again. "This is police brutality. I know my rights." "Ma'am, you just assaulted a police officer and attempted to take my weapon." By this point, several more police cars and an ambulance had arrived on scene. Additional officers took Karen into custody while paramedics checked on the female officer. I saw them talking to the muscular man who had intervened, likely getting his statement. I sat in my car for a while longer trying to process everything I had just witnessed. When things finally calmed down, I gave my own statement to the police before heading home, forgetting all about my original grocery errand. In the days that followed, I kept tabs on a story through local news. Karen, as it turned out, had prior convictions for assault and weapons charges. Given the severity of her actions that day, she was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison. The female officer made a full recovery and publicly thanked the Good Samaritan who had come to her aid. The police department honored him with a Civilian Bravery Award. Honestly, I'll never look at a routine trip to the grocery store the same way again. You truly never know when an everyday errand might turn into a life or death situation. I'm just grateful that in this case tragedy was averted, all thanks to the quick actions of both law enforcement and an ordinary citizen willing to step up when it mattered most. I was eager to start my career in the city of Shanghai when I was fresh out of university with a degree in marketing. The job market was tough, but I managed to land a position at a mid-sized advertising firm. At first, I was thrilled. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to gain experience and climb the corporate ladder. Little did I know that my excitement would soon turn into dread. My boss, a woman in her late 40s who I will call Karen, seemed nice enough during the interview. But as soon as I started working, her true colors began to show. It started with small things. She'd asked me to stay late to finish up urgent tasks that could easily wait until the next day. Then it escalated to weekend work. It was Karen calling me on Saturday mornings, claiming there was an emergency at the office. One day, about 6 months into the job, I was packing up to leave at 6 p.m. when Karen stormed over to my desk. "Where do you think you're going?" "Home. It's past office hours, and I've finished all my tasks for the day." "Finished? Ha! There's always more work to be done. I need you to stay and revise the presentation for tomorrow's client meeting." "But I already revised it twice. The client approved the last version." "Well, I want it perfect. You're young, you have plenty of energy. It's not like you have kids waiting at home, right?" I was speechless. I stayed that night seething with anger as I made pointless changes to an already approved presentation. This became a regular occurrence. Karen would find any excuse to keep me at the office well past working hours. The situation was taking a toll on my mental health and my relationship with my husband. He could see how stressed and unhappy I was, but I was afraid to quit without another job lined up. The breaking point came about a year into the job. I had been feeling unwell all day, fighting off a nasty cold. As I was about to leave, Karen approached my desk again. "I need you to stay late and compile the monthly report." "I'm really not feeling well today. Can I do it first thing tomorrow morning?" "You're not giving birth right now, are you? Then you're perfectly fine staying behind to finish this extra work." I was stunned. The casual cruelty of her words hit me like a slap in the face. I stayed that night, fighting back tears as I worked on a report. When I got home, I broke down and told my husband everything. He was furious. He wanted to storm into the office and confront Karen. but I begged him not to. I was already looking for other jobs, and I didn't want to burn bridges in such a competitive industry. 2 months later, I finally landed a new position at a smaller, more ethical company. I put in my 2 weeks' notice, enduring Karen's snide remarks and increased workload until my last day. Once I was safely out of that toxic environment, my husband decided it was time for some petty revenge. He spent an entire weekend using Karen's phone number to sign up for dozens of abortion clinic services. For the next week, I received gleeful updates from former co-workers about Karen's predicament. Apparently, her phone was ringing nonstop with calls from various clinics offering their services. She was seen yelling into her phone in the middle of the office. Coworker tells me, "You won't believe what's happening. Karen's phone keeps ringing with calls from abortion clinics. She's losing her mind." Oh, really? That's interesting. She's been screaming at everyone, claiming someone's playing a prank on her. It's chaos here. I feigned innocence, but inside I was cackling with satisfaction. The calls reportedly continued for over a week, disrupting Karen's work and making her a laughing stock in the office. The cherry on top came when one of my ex-co-workers told me that Karen had been called into a meeting with a company's HR department. Apparently, the constant calls about abortion services had raised concerns about her professionalism and conduct in the workplace. He says, "You missed the best part. HR called Karen in for a meeting about maintaining a professional image. They were concerned about all the abortion clinic calls she was getting at work." I tell him, "Wow, that must have been embarrassing for her." Embarrassing? She was mortified. I heard her screeching from inside the conference room, something about a conspiracy against her. Karen received a formal warning from HR and was ordered to attend sensitivity training. The irony of her being punished for something she had no control over, just as she had done to me countless times, was deliciously satisfying. And I thrived in my new job. The work environment was supportive, my skills were appreciated, and most importantly, I could leave at a reasonable hour without feeling guilty. My husband and I never spoke about his revenge plan, but I caught him smirking whenever I mentioned Karen's comeuppance. I've always been a bit of a chatterbox. My parents would often joke that I started talking before I could walk. It's not that I meant to ramble on, but I just had so many thoughts and ideas swirling around in my head that I couldn't help but let them spill out. My dad, on the other hand, was more of the strong, silent type. He worked as a construction foreman, spending his days barking orders and solving problems on job sites. When he got home, he usually preferred peace and quiet. But being the good father he was, he tried his best to listen to my endless stories and anecdotes. One day when I was about 14, I burst into the living room, eager to share my latest adventure from school. My dad was sitting in his favorite armchair, reading the newspaper. "Dad, you won't believe what happened today." So there I was in the cafeteria, and I launched into my tale, describing every detail of a food fight that had broken out during lunch. I was just getting to the good part when my dad suddenly interrupted me. "Keep talking. I'm listening very carefully." Before I could even process what he'd said, he stood up, walked out of the room, and closed the door behind him. I stood there, mouth agape, not sure whether to laugh or be offended. After a moment, I decided it was kind of funny, in a weird dad joke sort of way. But it was also pretty rude, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I've been dismissed. As I went back to my room, I overheard my dad chuckling to my mom about his clever joke. She didn't seem as amused as he was, but he was clearly proud of himself. And that's when I decided that too could play at this game. I just needed to bide my time and wait for the right moment. A couple of hours later, I was in my room doing homework when I heard a knock on my door, and my dad poked his head in. "Hey, can you come do the dishes? Your mom and I are heading out for a bit." This was it. My moment had arrived. I put on my most innocent face and looked up at him. "You know I can't." "What do you mean you can't? Why can't you do the dishes?" "I told you earlier." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did. You know this. You told me you were listening very carefully." I watched as realization dawned on my dad's face. His eyes widened, and for a moment, he looked like he was trying to decide whether to be angry or impressed. "Oh, right. Well, could you remind me? I forgot." "Nice try, Dad." But I wasn't about to let him off the hook that easily. No way, I'm not repeating myself. I already gave you a very simple and rational explanation. My dad stood there for a moment, clearly torn between his natural instinct to assert his authority and the grudging admiration he felt for my clever turnabout. I could see the gears turning in his head as he weighed his options. Finally, he let out a deep sigh. Alright, you got me. Well played, kid. I'll do the dishes this time. I'd stood up to my dad, not with anger or defiance, but by beating him at his own game. It was a small victory, but it felt huge to me. He says, but don't think this means you're off the hook for chores in the future. Wouldn't dream of it, Dad. Just remember to listen carefully next time I'm talking. He chuckled as he headed downstairs, shaking his head. From that day on, our relationship shifted slightly. My dad never pulled that keep talking joke again, but more importantly, he seemed to make more of an effort to really listen when I spoke.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.